Hi, everyone.
Hi, guys. So, this is week six of our Read Through the Bible. Let me just go ahead and show y'all, because we really need y'all to subscribe, because we are having a contest each week. This week, I'll show you what we have for our giveaway. But we only have about 5 people in the contest right now, and as much money as I spend on these, I need to at least have 7 or 8 or so. I've been usually getting about 10 to 11. So please go ahead and subscribe to this video. If you have subscribed already, please share this video on one of your social media accounts, like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. Well, I'm sorry, it's X now. But this is our giveaway this week. It is really, really pretty. Love the leopard. It's so sparkly, so glittery. Like, where is the camera showing to?
It'll show up here.
Okay. And this, I especially ordered these beads, so they're really, really pretty. I love them. And then here's the earrings. So please go ahead and subscribe for us. And if you've already subscribed, go ahead and share. And we would really, really appreciate it. And just thank you so much in advance for helping us grow our channel. All right. So let's get into week 6 of reading through the Bible.
Yeah, so week 6 is a bit late, but we are going to be going through week 6. And week 6 is all about the Exodus. So what are your questions?
Okay.
Let's go through it.
So we're starting on the first page, and it's where the Israelite foreman, was beaten by Pharaoh's slave drivers. And so God goes to Moses and says, go tell Pharaoh to let my people go. Mm-hmm. He's not going to do it, but go tell him. And of course, Pharaoh imposes heavier work on the Hebrews so they'll not pay attention to the deceptive words of Moses. Because Moses is asking him for some time off for his people to go into the wilderness for 3 days. And he doesn't want just his people. He wants his people and all their livestock. Everything. He wants the men, the women, the children, the livestock. I mean, because we know he ultimately is going to take them away from there. But that's what he's asking for at this point. Mm-hmm. So,
I wonder what God knew what he would do.
Right.
But let's say Pharaoh did let them go for 3 days. They just walk away, run away after lying? Would they lie? That's a what if, but the what if doesn't matter as much because God knows what he would do. He said, Pharaoh's not going to do this. He's not going to let you go for 3 days. And so I'm going to set you free completely.
Right. So Moses is trying to talk to them, but they have such a broken spirit and they're under such hard labor that they just don't listen to him. Mm-hmm. And he complains through the whole time about being a poor speaker. And so God appoints Aaron, his brother, to go with him to be his speaker, like his prophet, basically. Mm-hmm. And it goes on to tell us like the different ages of all the different people who lives. Like Levi lived 137 years, and then just on and on. I'm sorry. I'm knocking this. We got new microphones, so we're not used to them. And so we go on to these plagues. We go to the miracles that God sends. And so he's turning the water.
What are those miracles? You want to tell us the 3?
The serpent and the staff, the blood in the water. Oh, what was the other one? Oh, yeah, when he puts his hand into his cloak, it is normal. Then when he takes it out, it is shriveled up. And then when he puts it back in, it's normal, and takes it back out, it's normal again. But anyway, I love the miracle where he turns all the water in Egypt to blood, but not just like in the rivers and lakes or whatever. It's literally even in the wood and stone containers, so that they cannot say it's not a miracle. So I love that.
Yeah, and if you'll notice through each and every one of these until you get to the gnats, Pharaoh's magicians use occult practices to try to replicate this.
And they do.
They do. The issue is they can't stop it. They just make it worse. They make more blood water.
Right.
They can't reverse what's been done either.
They make everything worse when Moses throws his staff down and it turns into a serpent. And I mean, they do the same thing, but Moses' staff eats their snake. Then they turn the water into blood. That all the things that they do, they come back and do it. But you're right. It's worse because these things are not meant to be good things, you know? But of course, all the way up to the gnats. And then I think God's like, I'm tired of playing with this. Like, I really feel like God was just like, I'm tired of playing with y'all.
Well, it shows that the sort of magic the power you can get from magic is limited and never can be as powerful as God.
Exactly. It said that Moses was to be like God to Pharaoh, and Aaron was to be like his prophet. And he tells over and over about how he's going to harden Pharaoh's heart. I'm assuming so that he can show how powerful he is.
Well, he says it. So
they may worship me.
First he says, Pharaoh's not going to listen to you. And then he says, I'm also going to harden Pharaoh's heart. So that way I can show you and Egypt who I am. And later we'll see it's also judgment on Egypt, its idols, and its people. Especially that final plague where the firstborn. But we'll get to that.
Yeah, he said so that I'm going to harden their heart. I'm going to harden his heart so they may worship me.
What?
So they may worship me, is what he says on one part.
Oh, okay. I get what you mean. He's hardening Pharaoh's heart so that way he can release the Israelites so they'll worship him.
Right. And of course, like, Moses was 80 years old and Aaron was 83 years old when they spoke to Pharaoh. So they're on up there in some age. Mm-hmm. Do we find out later how old was Moses when he died?
120.
120.
Somewhere around there.
So he's only got about 40 more years. Wait. So he dies right at the end of the wilderness, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. And he doesn't get to go in the promised land.
Yeah. But we didn't read that. Did we? At the end of Exodus.
It might be at the end of Numbers.
It has to be.
Or Deuteronomy.
We didn't read it. All right. So next is the gnats from the dust. So there's gnats.
Right, first.
Wait, frogs.
Yeah.
I must have wrote the gnats. So there's frogs.
So there's blood water.
Right.
Then there's frogs. Then.
So there's the blood water, and the magicians did the same thing. So they did not reverse these miracles.
That's what I said. They didn't make it better. They just
repeated these plagues.
They made the plague worse by adding to the plague.
What were they thinking? Like, were they trying to clean it up and it just...
No, ma'am. They were trying to show that they had the same power.
Why would they do that, though? That's so ridiculous.
Because this is not just let my people go. This is my God is better than your gods.
Yeah, that's true, right.
And so they're like, nah, our gods can do that too. But then their God, whatever they serve, can't reverse it. Only Yahweh can reverse it. And only Yahweh can do these other things too, that we'll see later.
So the frogs die, and there are heaps of them, and they stink. And then God sends gnats from the dust. And that's when the magicians cannot repeat that.
Yep. And before that, Pharaoh starts hardening his heart a bunch.
Mm-hmm. So then we go into the flies.
Mm-hmm. Biting flies. I would assume they're biting.
Says no flies will be in Goshen. Is that how you say it?
Yes. So
where the Israelites lived. So,
some of these plagues avoid the Israelites.
mm-hmm.
Some of these do affect the Israelites.
Yeah.
The final one affects everyone unless you are protected and God's judgment is not on you. And the only way to be protected from the wrath or the judgment of God, the justice of God, is the blood of the Lamb, which covers you and protects you. And we'll get to that later.
So God says about the flies, like, tomorrow I will make a distinction between my people and your people. So up until then, the poor Israelites have had to endure all this stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, God's like, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to make a difference between my people and your people. I'm going to begin to show you whose God I am. And then Pharaoh's starting to give up a little bit. He says he sends messengers to say, go sacrifice to your God within Egypt. Don't go very far. And he tells them, you can go, but don't go very far and make an appeal for me. Because this is when the bulls come, right? And even the magicians get the bulls. You know, they are like, oh my gosh, we're really at the lowest of lows. So not only do the magicians get the bulls, but so do the animals. And then Pharaoh says, this is the finger of God. Oh, I'm sorry, not Pharaoh. Pharaoh's magicians say, this is the finger of God.
Yeah, so the idea there is they're starting to recognize, wait a second, God's powerful.
Yeah.
And it could also mean that there is some sort of occult power you can have apart from spiritual entities by engaging in occult practices, because they say it's the finger of God, but the underlying word would probably have been Elohim, which could be God or gods. So whatever they're doing, whatever supernatural power they have, they're like, wait a second, we can't do this. This is like really God.
So no, one part says, what we will sacrifice to the Lord is detestable to the Egyptians. And we already saw that in Joseph. So what is that? I asked you that before when we were reading about Joseph and how the Pharaoh was detested like animals. Like
they detested shepherds. That was a job, not the animals. This is the animals that they detest too.
Why do they detest
specifically
animals?
These sacrifices?
Why?
Because they're sacrificing Yahweh. If we sacrifice what the Egyptians detest in front of them, won't they stone us?
Oh, so it's not the animals, it's the God that they're sacrificing to.
I would say so. I mean, the animals they would be sacrificing are cows, goats, sheep, birds. I don't think the Egyptians worship, well, I don't know. The Egyptians did worship kind of a few animals.
Remember?
So maybe there was an animal in there that they would worship.
Maybe.
As they didn't want to do it in front of
them. So I also wrote down that all the Egyptians' livestock died, but none among the Israelites' livestock died.
I wonder if the Egyptians that trusted Yahweh, if their stuff died too.
I guarantee it didn't. You think?
Or maybe they just started trusting in Yahweh after all these plagues.
Yeah.
Because it does say later that a bunch of Egyptians fear God because of all the things that have been happening.
So, of course, once again, it says, let my people go so they may worship me. And this is when he's basically like pretending to be a god.
He's always pretended that. Pharaoh is seen as the avatar of usually Ra, the sun god, or he's seen as like the firstborn of Ra, like the most powerful son. of the gods, which is what the darkness plague and the firstborn plague target, in addition to their idolatry. But, yeah, pretty cool.
And so then God sends hail. And they go and warn them. They say, bring everyone and everything inside. And they don't listen.
In 20, those among Pharaoh's officials who feared the word of the Lord made their servants and their livestock flee to the shelters. But those who didn't take heart to the Lord's word left their servants and livestock in the field.
Mm-hmm.
So you see Egyptians starting to listen.
Right. It says the only place it didn't hail was in Goshen.
Mm-hmm.
Am I saying that correctly?
I think you're saying it right.
Yeah, there's thunder, lightning, and hail. I mean, it was just raining cats and dogs. And once again, Pharaoh still did not let the Israelites go. I mean, God is just saying the earth belongs to me through all of this. And they're not listening.
He's saying your gods, either if they're real, they're evil spiritual entities and they don't have as much power as me. And you're all idolaters. You're all worshiping false gods. And keep in mind, the Israelites were also worshiping false gods at that time.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Because they have to make a choice with Joshua. When Joshua says, look, you can either go back to the land and worship those gods you left, or you can worship Yahweh. And then later, Ezekiel will reference how Yahweh brought them out of their land and they were supposed to abandon their detestable idols, which is why they're also under the final judgment. The final judgment of the 10th plague is against specifically all the gods of Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone has to do this or they will be under judgment.
So you think there was some Israelites who didn't put the blood on their door frame?
I don't know. Possible. I think it's unlikely that there were too many.
Think they were following Yahweh and their other gods. So they were probably doing what God told them to do.
But they were definitely, most of the Israelites did what Yahweh said and put the blood. Because it does say that the 10th plague, he says it won't hit the people of Israel. But then he tells the people of Israel, it will hit you if you don't do this. So it makes me think most of them did that.
So, of course, God continues to harden Pharaoh's heart.
Pharaoh hardens his own heart. Pharaoh hardens Pharaoh's heart. We see this. It's like and then sometimes it just says Pharaoh's heart becomes hard. So you'll see Pharaoh's heart becomes hard. Pharaoh hardens his own heart. And then God hardens Pharaoh's heart. So that's called judicial judgment or judicial hardening, where you are already choosing a path, and God's just saying, okay, now you're going to be on that path. I'm going to keep you on that path. So that way you can be judged. You made
the first choice. Yeah.
Yeah, so you chose to be evil. You chose to worship these gods, and you didn't listen when I gave you a choice. So now you're going to be stuck there until I judge you.
Okay, and so here comes the locust. And Pharaoh's officials are like, are you kidding me? Like, Egypt's already devastated. Like, give them people what they want. And Pharaoh still will not do it. He says, I'm only going to let the able-bodied men go. And Moses is like,
No, he says, we'll let all the other people go, not the able-bodied men.
Moses replied, we will go with our young and with our old. We will go with our sons and with our daughters, with our flocks and with our herds, because we must hold the Lord's festival.
Oh, wait.
He said
I read it wrong. I flipped Moses' words with...
He said to them, the Lord would have to be with you if I would ever let you and your families go. Look out. You're heading for trouble. No, go. Just able-bodied men. Worship the Lord, since that's what you want. And they were driven from Pharaoh's presence. I wrote a little note that God hardened Pharaoh's heart so he could continue to do miraculous signs, so Moses and the Israelites would know he was their Lord.
Mm-hmm. And just so that people of Egypt would know that God is.
And they could pass the stories down through the generations. So of course, here's the locust. It does come in and it wipes them out. I mean, Pharaoh is mad. Like, the east wind brings in the locust like never before and never again in all of Egypt. And I mean, everything's black. There's no green left. And so Pharaoh told Moses to leave him and never see his face again or he would die. And there was it was dark.
Right before that, he lies and says to let them go and then doesn't.
Yeah. So he does trick them or he lies. He don't trick them. He lies and says that he'll do it. And then Moses goes ahead and asks God to take the locusts away. So the west wind comes in, carries off the locusts, and drowns them into the Red Sea. And then we see Pharaoh lied, and he doesn't let them go. So then he says, I'll let you go, but you can't take your animals. And God was like, no.
Well, first he says, God puts the darkness, and then he says he'll do that.
So there is complete darkness for 3 days. So much so, the Egyptians could see nothing. There was complete darkness. They did not move from where they were. I mean, they did not even move, I guess, out of their homes or anywhere. They were scared to go anywhere because it was complete darkness. The Israelites, though, had light where they were. So they were able just to move around and do whatever. It was just like a normal day. So
then he said, you can go, but you gotta leave your flocks here.
Mm-hmm. And then we see where it's going to be, you're going to lose your firstborn male of all of Egypt, all the firstborn males, unless the doorframe, there's blood on the doorframe.
So he starts telling them, I'm going to do this. And then he says, you guys go ask your Egyptian neighbors for stuff, and they'll give it to you. Because now they're just terrified of the Lord.
Yeah. And they did too. But
so here's specifically what it is. A lot of people say a destroying angel. I don't quite know where that says, because it says, this is what the Lord says about midnight. I will go throughout Egypt, and every firstborn male of Egypt will die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on the throne, the firstborn of servant girl, firstborn of every livestock. But against the Israelites, nothing will happen, is basically what he'll say. So that you may know, the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. Makes me think that all the Israelites put blood on their door frames.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then
the Lord's, and then he says, he starts outlining the Passover after that. No, go ahead, sorry.
Well, no, I just put over here a little note after they wake up after midnight and they see that all their firstborn are dead.
Well, we haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, I know. I just made a little note over here because it is talking about it. And so I just said, a great cry of anguish like never before and never again. Because, I mean, never again has God killed all the firstborn of an entire country.
And you got to think, most of the firstborn would be older. This is the firstborn.
Right.
So Pharaoh's firstborn might have just been his next in line son. That was going to be Pharaoh. Young man, dead in the middle of the night.
So it says, Moses was highly regarded by Pharaoh's officials and the Egyptian people. God told the Israelites to ask their neighbors for silver and gold items, and I believe clothing too. And then he gave them instructions. He said, be dressed for travel. Eat your food fast. Because he knew that after this firstborn miracle, that Pharaoh would be like, leave, get out now. And so he gave them instructions on how to get out fast. But he goes on to tell about putting the blood on the doorposts and that there'll be festivals throughout generations from now for them to observe for this Passover.
This is so important an event that God wants them to make a festival. And you have to observe this festival exactly the way he says it. And if you don't, you're to be cut off from your people.
Yep. And
That is
the
not...
unleavened bread festival lasts for 7 days. So, Moses has told Pharaoh, he even warned him about the death of all the firstborn males. And, I was thinking when I was reading this, like you would think, because he hasn't lied yet, and every single other thing has came true. But I guess Pharaoh's heart is still hardened. He's still not willing to do these things. What is this word, lintel, Lintel? I put a question mark by it.
It's like a door frame.
So not only does Moses tell Pharaoh that it's going to be the death of all your firstborn sons, but it'll also be of the firstborn of animals, the firstborn male of all the animals too. I mean, I wouldn't even think they had much left in Egypt because all these plagues have wiped out pretty much everything. And now, if there was anything left, the firstborn of all of it's going to die.
Well, remember, this would also happen to the Israelites if they didn't do it. So the Israelites had animals.
I'm just saying, like, come on. I'm with the Egyptian officials. Like, come on, Pharaoh. We got very little left. What are you thinking? They were thinking it. They probably couldn't say it because he'd have them put to death, but they were thinking, what is wrong with you?
They did say it, didn't they?
Well, one time, they're like, Egypt is basically destitute right now.
When the Lord passes through to strike Egypt and sees the blood on the lintel and the 2 doorposts, he'll pass over the door and not let the destroyer enter your houses to strike you. That's where the destroyer comes from.
So we know that all of the Israelites did it because this says no Israelites or their animals died, not one.
Where?
I don't know. I wrote a note.
In verse 7 of 11, it says that there won't be something that even snarls. It means there won't be many, it won't make much of an impact on them.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, I made a note over here, so it's on this page somewhere, I think, that says no Israelites or their animals died, not one.
I don't know where it says that not a single one died, but I would say that so many of them did it. Most of them did it. Almost all of them did it. Because if not many of them did it, then there definitely would have been a very big impact, and 11:7 wouldn't make sense. Now, in verse 13 of 12 and 13, he explains what this Passover is about. It's about judgment. It's about judgment against all the gods of Egypt. But if it's a judgment against the gods, then why are the people getting struck down? Why are their firstborns? Because the people are idolaters, and they're worshiping these gods, which includes the Israelites, because they're also under this. If the Israelites weren't participating and deserving of the same judgment on the gods of Egypt, because they weren't worshiping any idols, they wouldn't have to do this Passover. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But because they were participating in also worshiping the gods of Egypt, that's maybe alongside Yahweh, they need to be protected from God's judgment, his justice, his wrath against evil and the evil gods of Egypt. So the lamb and its death and blood provide protection. This is a major typological foreshadowing of Jesus. He's the lamb who, when he dies, not only protects us from God's justice and judgment on sin and evil, but he also cleanses us of sin, so that way we can never deserve it again by taking the punishment we deserve. So this is typological foreshadowing in the Old Testament. And that's why, one of the reasons why I think he said to remember and do this all the time. But in addition to that, I saved you at this point.
So he says, none of you are to go out of your house until the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And
If they had, they probably would have died.
Yeah.
Even if they weren't a firstborn.
And so he talks about the destroyer will pass over the door if there's blood on the doorpost.
But he also says, I will pass over you.
And not let the destroyer enter your houses to strike.
Earlier he says, I will pass over Egypt and strike them, the firstborn. Some people will say the destroyer is Jesus because they think the angel of the Lord is often Jesus.
Yeah, I do too.
And they'll go, and that he's basically sending Jesus to strike down all of the firstborn in this judgment.
But I have a note, and I cannot find it, that says no Israelites or their animals died, not one. So I'm thinking that all of them put the blood over their door.
And some of the Egyptians did, because they leave with them.
So at midnight, all firstborn males died. All the Egyptian firstborn males died.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean none of the Egyptians followed them?
No, ma'am. Later, a mixed multitude lead.
Okay. Then why does it say all firstborn males died?
Because it's just referencing all the people
now
who didn't do
midnight
it.
the Lord struck every firstborn male in the land of Egypt.
But there are also Goshens in the land of Egypt. So if we're going by just a strict understanding, he also struck everyone in the Israelite. So it's just saying God did what he said, and if he didn't have the blood on it, it was struck. And by the way, strike is almost always in the context of judgment.
So it says, take your flocks and your herds. He's telling Moses, take your flocks and your herds as you ask and leave, and also bless me. Because there was a loud wailing throughout all of Egypt. I can only imagine. So they had already collected the silver and gold items and the clothing.
So freaking arrogant to say bless me.
I know. 600,000 men and their families left at that time.
And it says in 38, a mixed crowd.
One. There wasn't a house without someone dead.
Where?
I don't know where. I just made a little note right here. And the Israelites lived in Egypt for 430 years. So
it must be hyperbole because I'm pretty sure there were Israelites where there was a house that wasn't dead. And you read in 38, a mixed crowd go up, which means there are some Egyptians and people of other races that were living there that at least trusted in Yahweh. And if they didn't trust in Yahweh, they wouldn't have put that blood on it. So I think it's just saying, look, the death was everywhere. Unless it just means, unless no one who is Egyptian whatsoever, unless they were living with an Israelite, did it. But that doesn't seem very likely because it says that there were people who feared the Lord enough to tell their servants to go in. And it also says that there are Egyptians that come out with the Israelites. So I don't know. It might be hyperbole in this instance.
So it says the Israelites swore an oath to Joseph. So Moses took Joseph's bones with him. I remember we read that when we were going over Joseph, right? They did not go through the land of the Philistines. They left Egypt in battle formation. I bet that was so cool to see 600,000 men and all their families leaving in battle formation. Just think Braveheart. Just think mega Braveheart in that movie, like where there's like, as far as I can see, just people like in rows moving out. And then God tells them, consecrate every firstborn male to me. So does that mean just kind of like dedicate them, all of their firstborn males?
Set them apart as holy, basically.
So like we do when we do like a dedication for our children.
Except they were supposed to redeem them.
Meaning?
Make a sacrifice so they don't have to die.
Oh, so consecrate them by making like a sacrifice for them.
Yes, ma'am.
All the firstborn males.
So he says, all your firstborn, the firstborn of your livestock, the firstborn and your firstborn sons belong to me. And he said, you can redeem them. You can redeem your animals with another animal sacrifice.
Right.
But if you don't, you got to kill them and give them to me that way. But then he said, you must redeem your sons. Okay. Basically saying, you can't just let them die. Yeah. You have to save them.
You have been getting on my nerves, so I think. All right, so God never left them. He was with them in a pillar of cloud by day and pillar of fire by night.
Mm-hmm.
All right, on day 3 of week 6. So the Israelites were supposed to only be gone 3 days in the wilderness, but they were fleeing permanently. So Pharaoh chased after the Israelites. He used 600 chariots and with I don't know how many officers in each one.
Basically, probably every officer that didn't really fear the Lord.
And then God tells Moses, the Egyptians you see today, you will never see them again. Just be still and I will fight for you. Not one Egyptian survived that day.
Yeah. Seems like the officers and Pharaoh were like, we need to get them back. We want our slaves back.
Mm-hmm. So the waters of the Red Sea were divided in one night. They formed water walls.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the east wind that did it. Like it was all it. You read through here and it's always the east wind, the east. All right. So it says break camp. When they found out that the Egyptians were right behind them, or not right behind them, but they were behind them, said break camp and go through the Red Sea on the dry ground.
Yeah. So he basically, they start saying, they complain. They're like, oh, why'd you bring us here? We're just going to all die now. And Moses is like, nah, the Lord will take care of you. The Lord will fight for you. You just be quiet. And then overnight, he directs a massive, strong wind into the waters and made it swirl the waters up into walls, which for the Lord, easy, but waters would have to be incredibly powerful, or wind would have to be incredibly powerful to make water stand up as walls. So God is shooting wind at them because he obviously can control it. And then it says the angel of God, who is guiding them,
who's traveling in front of the Israelites,
moves
behind
them, which prevents the Egyptians from doing anything to them all night while God's blowing the waters apart.
Well, because God confused the Egyptian forces and made their chariots difficult to drive.
I'm talking about verse 19 and 20. This is before they even go into the water. The angel of God goes behind them, and so neither group came near each other all night long while the waters were being blown apart. But
isn't that when God confused the Egyptian forces and made their chariots difficult to drive?
No, that's in 25.
Okay. Well,
and it says the angel of God who is going in this pillar went behind them. And then in 24, it says the Lord looks down at the Egyptian forces from the pillar.
Yeah.
So the angel of God is the Lord.
Which we always say.
That sounds like Jesus.
Yep. But I'm sorry, but I do not know how they could question God after being able to walk through the Red Sea. And then turning around and watching all of them drown. Like, what's wrong with y'all? But, I mean, I guess we are like that, too.
They could have just thought Yahweh was another Egyptian deity.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, you would worship something that could part a Red Sea and kill off an entire nation of men. Or should I say, all of the officials. God threw Pharaoh's chariots and his army into the sea and drowned them all. I love how the Bible said God threw them in there. It wasn't like an accident. It wasn't like, yeah, let me think about this or whatever. God threw them in there. He was angry. He had a burning wrath.
Yeah, it was judgment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's plain and simple. It's judgment on the Egyptians And it was judgment through the firstborn. They could have technically stayed alive if they just hadn't chased him down.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not. This
God
is
was like,
additional
"Are you
judgment."
serious? You're really going to chase my people down now?"
So,
But you had to see that coming because that is sick. What was it, 600,000 or 650,000
men. That means
and
all
their
the women
families?
and the children
600,000 men and their families
and their
that they
flocks.
lost, and that was how they were getting free labor all those years. So, the Bible says that they were destroyed with God's breath.
Yep.
You destroyed them all with your breath.
Yes.
Blast from your nostrils.
So they're comparing the wind that God used to separate the waters
As his breath.
as his breath.
And then they say, "Lord, everyone will fear you now." I would hope so.
The Israelites were singing this song too. Sadly, when they get to the mountain, they
forget to sing it.
They do a 180.
Yeah. And then I made a note. Do you think that some of the Egyptians leave with the Israelites, and you say you do believe?
I definitely think that.
Yeah.
They would have married with the Egyptians over 200 to 400 years, depending on which timeline you take.
Because this country is a little over 200 years, and we have all kinds of.
But not many would have married into them. Remember, the Egyptians thought shepherds were detestable.
And that's what the Israelites
That's what most of the Israelites were. And then Miriam sings a short song.
Yeah, Miriam, the prophetess, took a tambourine and led the other women in dancing and singing.
Interesting note. Lots of prophecy is done to music.
Lots of prophecy is? Did not know that. All right, so there's bitter water in, how do you say that? M-A-R-A-H?
Mara.
So Moses throws a tree into the water and it becomes drinkable. That's pretty awesome. So after they cross the Red Sea, they go into the wilderness of Shur. Did I say that right? And they're starving to death because there's nothing there. And by wilderness, that means desert, right? Every time I always used to think about the wilderness, I realized that had to be the desert there.
Not necessarily. It just means a place that is largely uninhabitable or hostile to life. Yeah. Now, I think it's interesting that he has to reassure them to listen to him in 26. He's like, look, remember, guys, you just listen to me, do what I say. You won't suffer the same judgment that I did on the Egyptians. So I'm going to heal you. That's in verse 26 of 15, 26. Which he's basically saying, look, those illnesses, all those things I did, those were judgments. You know that. And it won't come on you at all. I'll be your healer and I'll be your protector like I've already done. You just need to listen to me. All right.
So
they immediately start complaining.
They start complaining and grumbling for water and food. And they're like, we're starving to death. And so God, they're 3 days in the wilderness without water, and you can't go much longer without water. So they're just like, we're going to thirst to death and we're starving to death. And so God sends manna, which is like the bread from heaven. And the manna is basically an obedience test. Because he gives them instructions on how to do it. And let's see if they follow it. So at twilight in the evening, God sends the quail.
Okay. So for the manna test, they were supposed to only gather what they needed for the day.
Yeah.
If they gathered any more.
So, yeah. At 4 quarts of manna on the 6th day, none on the Sabbath. And go ahead. You can go ahead and tell all that. But manna, I did not realize this, that I'd forgotten this since the last time I read through, but manna, I was like, this is probably the desert, right?
It's the wilderness.
So
there could be desert areas. There could be stretches where there's not much grass. There could be stretches where there's just not much water.
Says that this is fine flakes on the desert surface, as fine as frost on the ground. So, how did they eat sand with their manna? Because that's disgusting.
They
Because if it's fine flakes, how did they sort it? Did they have a sifter or something?
maybe.
But if so, did that sift out the sand? Ooh, I can't imagine eating.
Or maybe there was just so much that they could just grab that off the top layer.
Yeah, but there's still dirt in it. Ugh.
Who cares about the dirt? They're starving to death.
I know, that's true.
And since they took it, they might have just cooked it.
And the dirt would kind of come off of it or
I
something?
don't know.
Well, it says that the manna resembled like coriander seed. So maybe they really could pick it out and maybe it was, but it says it's
No,
fine.
they just ate it. It said it tasted like wafers made with honey.
Yeah, mixed with dirt. It was white and tasted like wafers made with honey. The Israelites ate manna for 40 years until they reached the border of Canaan. Anyway, they were supposed to collect the manna in the morning, 2 quarts per person. And they had a bunch of rules to follow to collect this and how many to collect and what to collect on the 6th day so that they'd have it left over for the 7th. And did they obey Moses? They did not. And
You'll see that later.
Moses gets angry.
Oh, wait. You just see that now. Sorry.
Yeah. So now we're over here. Moses sends for Zipporah. Oh, no. I'm sorry. Moses sent Zipporah back home to Jethro along with his sons.
Then they come and talk to, and they bring Jethro over. But first, they have to fight Amalek.
Oh, yeah.
And they hold the staff up, and they help him hold the staff up. And because God is making sure that people know that he's with Moses, as long as Moses is doing what God said, everybody's okay. If Moses isn't, everybody starts losing the battle. So they go over there and they make sure Moses is doing it.
Okay, so Moses' father-in-law is Jethro, the priest of Midian. But he was called something else over when we were reading about
Ruel.
Ruel. Who is that?
I don't know, but he definitely follows Yahweh now.
So also I'd made a note about the manna. It says Omer was a measure or like a thing that measured and held 2 quarts. So I guess they used that to measure out their manna each night. I wonder what an Omer looks like. I wanted to look that up and I didn't.
It's like a measuring cup, I guess.
Yeah, I wanted to look that up and I didn't.
So Jethro comes, and in 18:9, he rejoices over what they've done after Moses explains all of this. And then he says, "Blessed be the Lord who rescued you from the power of Egypt and from the power of Pharaoh. He's rescued the people from under the power of Egypt. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods because he did wonders when the Egyptians acted arrogantly against Israel." So, remember, in their mindset, there's other gods. They're lesser spiritual beings. And typically we call them demons now because they're deceiving people and worshiping them. But these people, they're like, okay, so these other gods are real, but they're not the same as Yahweh. Because Yahweh is like great. Yahweh's greater than all of them. So that's just kind of the mindset that we're seeing from Jethro here too, as a priest.
Okay, I made a note. Who is Hur? H-U-R. I saw that name like 2 different times.
Where?
I do not know, but I made a little question mark beside it because I was like, who is that? Right here. Number 12. When Moses' hands grew heavy, they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat down on it. Then Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and one on the other, so that his hands remained steady until the sun went down.
I do not know.
I know.
Someone who helped Moses.
But it talks about him earlier, too. All right.
I know who all those people are.
All right, what happens to Moses' Why? Why does he send her back? And back to where? I thought they were lost in the wilderness for 40 years. How does she know where to go? Moses sent Zipporah back home to Jethro along with his sons.
He probably just wanted them to stay safe with her until he was done doing the Exodus stuff with Aaron. Then,
yeah, but I'm saying, so they got out. So did he send them out before they got lost in the wilderness?
I would say so.
Okay.
And then now he's come back to meet up with them and talk to them.
Before they get lost in the wilderness. So this is before they're lost for 40 years.
They come and meet them in the wilderness.
Well, then how are they lost if people can just come and find them and go back home?
They're not lost.
Why are they in the wilderness for 40 years?
They're not lost yet.
That's what I'm saying.
They're not lost in the sense that God's guiding them. Okay. So God is guiding the Israelites. So all you need to do is send a messenger back the way you came towards Egypt and then turn towards to go to Midian. They don't know where they're going forward to. They know how to go back.
For 40 years. And from what I remember, it's like in real life, it's just a 12-day journey.
But God doesn't guide them anymore after they don't listen to him.
So they just walk around in circles
for 40 years. He keeps them in the land of the wilderness. He makes them lost.
All right. Moses judged the people from morning to night.
And he will not help them either to go into that land. Yeah. So they know they have to stay in the wilderness now. Because they can't go anywhere other than the wilderness.
And then so, his father-in-law says that's going to wear you out. So Moses got other judges for Israel, so he only handled the hard cases.
Mm-hmm.
So he listens to his father-in-law. So they come to the Sinai. How do you say that?
Mount Sinai.
Sinai wilderness. And they camp in front of the mountain.
And then the Lord says, look, you're gonna be my people, and you're gonna listen to me. You're gonna be my priests, you're gonna be my nation. And they're like, we're gonna do everything that God says. And then he tells them, he appears on the mountain, he tells Moses, go down and tell them this. And he gives them the 10 Commandments. And then Moses goes back up, and Yahweh tells him tons of commands, which takes 40 days. But he's already given the people of Israel the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, he did that the first time he goes up. But then Moses goes back down because they've already made an altar.
Not yet.
A calf.
He tells them the 10 Commandments first.
Right.
And then he writes down all that on tablets and comes back down. And that's how when he was up there for 40 days. So they already know they can't make idols and worship other gods. But they do it anyway.
I thought they don't get the 10 Commandments until after they made the idol.
The people cannot come up on Mount Sinai. Moses will come up. So Moses went down to the people and told them, this is 25. And then in 20, it says, then God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God. All the people witnessed the thunder and lightning, the sound of the ram's horn, and the mountain surrounded by smoke. And then they said, so after the Lord gives them the 10 Commandments in 21 through 17, they're like, okay, don't let God talk to us anymore. You go up there and talk to him, Moses. When they witnessed thunder and lightning, after God is talking to them. You go up there and talk to him, Moses. Don't let God talk to us directly. We're going to die.
So it says, anything or anyone who touches the mountain must be put to death. So God tells up Moses, it's just you. Nobody else. No, nothing. No one can touch the mountain. No hand may touch him. He will be stoned or shot with arrows to death until the ram's horn sounds a long blast.
Basically, God is up on this mountain. Only certain people can come up and talk to him. God was going to talk to them, but they, in their sinfulness and their fear, said, no, Yahweh, don't let Yahweh talk to us because we're going to die if you keep talking to us. So God actually agrees. he's like, okay, I'll tell you, Moses. I'm going to talk to you. And then he tells them, then the Lord told Moses, say this to the Israelites, you have seen that I have spoken to you from heaven. So he's saying, look, I just told you the 10 commandments. And then he tells Moses this, don't make gods of silver to rival me. Do not make gods of gold for yourselves. If you need to sacrifice to me, actually, no. Make an earthen altar for me. This is 19:24. And then do it in this way. And if you don't do it in this way, you're going to defile it, and I'm going to cut you off from your people. And then he goes into a long list of ordinances. And that goes on for a while. We could go over all these laws. Do you have any notes?
Okay, so we're on day 5. Oh, day 5 is like starts with the telling what to do and what. Death to a sorceress. Death to someone who engages in sex with an animal. And then it goes, it's just talking about God is gracious and do not follow a crowd in wrongdoing.
Mm-hmm.
Don't cultivate your land during the 7th year. Do not appear before God empty-handed. I read that twice. So that's a big thing, like, which we kind of know that, like, you might want to bring a tithe.
Where is it?
I don't know. I made it up right here on page 170. It's at the very bottom in 24. No, in 15. No one is to appear before me empty-handed. And then he also says 3 times a year, all males should appear before the Lord.
Oh, no one has appeared before me empty-handed is in the context of a festival where they're supposed to come with a sacrifice.
Right. And then I noticed throughout all the stuff we've read that to consecrate people, you have to splatter them with blood. That's kind of gross to us. We're not used to that now.
So blood represents life. That's the life. The blood of the animal is supposed to cleanse or protect the person you are putting it on from judgment. Because remember, their sins haven't been fully taken care of yet. The animal sacrifice system has to keep going on and on until Jesus comes and deals with it completely. So they're still in their sins, but they're living with God. God's their God. So there's got to be a way for them to deal with their sins so they can be with this holy God. Otherwise, they'll be destroyed for their sins, as we've seen during the Passover when God started destroying things. And he said, if this blood of the lamb will protect you on this judgment day. So in specific ways, they are being told sacrificial systems to both foster communion with God in the fellowship gatherings and fellowship offerings, cleanse them and their land of sin. So there is a sin stain on people, but your sin also affects the land in the sense that it can lead it to be
Did you set an alarm?
Ruined.
You need to go check it real quick.
And it'll restart when it gets there. It'll just make a new video.
It will?
Mm-hmm.
How'd you do that?
I set up that setting.
Oh, that's smart. So he also, remember I said 3 times a year all males should appear before the Lord, and he says, basically, if you do these things, if you serve me, then I will bless your food and water. You'll have no illnesses, no miscarriages, no childless people or couples, and you will reach the full number of your days. So basically, if you observe this custom of going to appear before me for 3 times a year, all males, then I will be your God and I'll take very good care of you. And apparently they probably didn't do that either, did they? Oh. And he also tells, I will set your borders from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, and from the wilderness to the Euphrates River.
And in chapter 24, after he does this first sacrifice and consecrates the elders, where the blood is going to, the sacrifice is, for lack of a better word, protecting them from judgment and from being destroyed because of God's judgment on sin. They all get to go up and eat near the cloud of the Lord. And it says, then Moses went up with Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of Israel's elders, and they saw the God of Israel. And then God did not harm the Israelite nobles. They saw him, and they ate and they drank. So the fear is God will destroy them because of their sin. But because they are now covered by the blood of these sacrifices, which represents life dying on their behalf, so you get this substitutionary aspect. You also get an aspect of the animal is taking what you deserved because the animal is dying instead of you. And then its life, its blood is being applied to you. And they get to be protected now because of that. And the full cleansing and purification and casting away of sin happens with Jesus. But these elders get to go and eat near God. Like God in this cloud of, obviously God doesn't have like a physical form, but he is appearing to them in this cloud and the thunder and the lightning. So
here's the her guy again. Where is it? I just made another note and now I can't find it.
And then now in 24:18, Moses goes up onto the mountain and he remains on the mountain 4 days, 4 nights.
Right.
After the Israelites already agreed to follow what God had already said in the 10 Commandments and agreed, because there were a few laws there. He gave a few laws. And then he's like, okay, now Moses is going to come up there and get the rest of it. And God will not only speak the 10 Commandments, because that's what he did earlier, but he's going to engrave it onto stone tablets for them. And that's what day 6 act in 25 is. So what are your questions there?
Well, first, I'm still trying to figure out who her is.
I do not know.
Because it says right here, so Moses arose with his assistant Joshua and went up the mountain of God. He told the elders, wait here for us until we return to you. Aaron and Hur are here with you. So is Hur like maybe Aaron's brother?
Maybe. Some sort of official, because he says that if you have a dispute, you go to them.
Yeah.
Joshua goes with Moses.
Right. Was Joshua able to see God? Because it says that
he doesn't go up into the mountain all the way like Moses, though. Because Moses has to come back down and talk to Joshua, who's been sort of like camping on the outer edges of the mountain. Okay. So Joshua gets to go up higher than others because
he gets to go on the mountain because the rest of them are not even allowed to touch it.
But Joshua is like up there sort of on the mountain just camping, because when Moses comes back later, after they build the gold calf, Joshua doesn't know what's going on because he's been up on the mountain waiting for Moses to come back out.
But it's talking about the appearance of the Lord's glory to the Israelites was like a consuming fire on the mountaintop. Moses entered the cloud as he went up the mountain, and he remained on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. So there's a big giant cloud covering the mountain for 6 days, and Moses just goes into it, and he's there for like 40 days and 40 nights.
And when the others were nearer to it, the Lord's appearance was like a fire on the mountain.
So they couldn't see the Lord, but they could just see like a fire.
So the Lord was speaking to them through these natural, amazing phenomenon. I would say supernaturally.
And then we go in on day 6 to the Exodus. I mean, into Exodus 25 through 28, where he tells them like all this stuff of how to make this offering to God.
Make the mercy seat.
Yeah, the Ark of the Testimony, which is going to hold the 10 Commandments. So the table, the plates, the cups, the pitchers, the bowls are all pure gold. The lampstand and the branches, I believe, are pure gold. And then put the bread,
the ephod.
Put the bread of presence on the table before me at all times. There's like 75 pounds of pure gold right there. I just wrote it all down, like all the different curtains and all the different descriptions of everything for the Ark of the Testimony. There behind the curtain. So the curtain will make a separation for you between the holy place and the most holy place. And it just goes through all of this.
And then Aaron has to have a special set of robes made for him.
It literally describes exactly how to make them.
He dies.
Holy garments for Aaron for glory and beauty.
All of this is trying to stress that sinful people cannot be near God unless God protects them.
Yeah. But it's a lot.
None of this stuff actually protects. No. It's not like they have to trust in that stuff.
They just have to be obedient.
This is all foreshadowing of Jesus, who ultimately cleanses us of our sins. And because he has cleansed us of paid for our sins, now by taking those sins and dying with them on the cross and taking what we deserve, the punishment we deserve, now we're cleansed of sins and we get to be near God. That's why the curtain to the most holy of holies tears in that earthquake.
Which is my favorite part of the Bible.
We can now approach God without this stuff. This stuff was there as a reminder. Hey, you guys are sinful. You cannot be near me unless I make provisions for you. So here's a sacrificial system. Here's specific ways you're going to do this. And you're going to treat me holy because I am holy. But I love you. I love you. I'm going to live with you. I'm going to take care of you. You just got to listen to me. But if you don't listen to me, you will die for your sins because you're sinful. But then Jesus comes, rips it, that barrier, that divide between us and God, where God no longer will destroy us for our sins because Jesus has paid for our sins. And anyone who trusts in him can be with him forever. And this is all just amazing typology.
And so through up to the end of week 6, it's just going over all the different stuff they got to do for the Ark of the Testimony. And also for the holy garments of Aaron and his sons.
And then a bunch of week 7 is consecrating Aaron and his sons.
We're going to do another
creating
video for week 7, right?
Yes, but I meant day 7.
Oh.
Oh, wait. No, that's week 7.
Yeah.
Day 7 is Sabbath. So, yeah. We're going to get into week 7. And that's
just a few minutes.
And sadly, we're going to see that the Israelites didn't listen when God told them what to do. Which means A, they're evil and stubborn. And B, they're stupid because God had just told them what to not do in the 10 Commandments. Make idols and worship other gods.
We would never be like that, but we proved time and time again we would be just like that.
And we're going to get into that, but I think it is a good reminder that it's not right, obviously, but it is understandable. They've been living amongst other gods their entire time in Egypt. They're like, oh crap, Moses hasn't come back down. Obviously, some sort of deity brought us out. So let's go worship a bunch of deities.
And so we figure out which one it is.
Now, these are the gods who saved you, and we're going to see that. But yeah.
So don't forget, subscribe. We have this gorgeous jewelry set to give away tomorrow night. That will be our video tomorrow night. So, I love this one. If you subscribe or share, your name will go in a drawing, and we will draw that tomorrow night for this set. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in week 7 video. Bye.
Love you. Bye.